everyone from wherever you're watching us from. My name is Teacher Nyakundi, and I'm privileged to take you through our English lesson today for the candidates, the Class 8 candidates. Although these lessons can also be invaluable for the Class 7 students and Class 6 students, because it's an English lesson, and most of the part that is covered in Class 8 is revision for the KCPE, which is from Class 6 to Class 8. So I welcome you all. I am Teacher Nyakundi. I am a teacher of English in the KBA group of schools, Maziwa campus. So welcome to today's lesson, and I'm going to take you through a very interesting lesson, I believe, which is active and passive voice in English. Active and passive voice. Those are two voices in English that are very common, but the common one, the most common of them is active voice. Active voice is where the subject is the one who is doing the action in that sentence. The subject of the sentence is doing the action. So the focus is on the subject of that sentence. In case you don't know what a subject means, a subject is a doer of the action in a sentence. In any sentence, we usually have the subject and the verb. And being in Class 8, right now you might have come across subject and verb agreement. And so you have learned there that subject is the doer of the action, while the verb shows us the action. Then we have another part of a sentence, which is the object, which receives the action of the verb. So in active voice, as I've said, the subject is the doer of the action and does the action, and our focus is on the subject. Let me take you to my notes lesson today, in case you want to have some notes. So in my introduction part, I am tackling active and passive voice. So active voice, a sentence is in the active voice if the subject performs the action expressed by the verb. For example, Angela kicked the ball. The teacher advised the child. Those are two sentences there which are in active voice. In sentence one above, Angela performs the action of kicking the ball. Angela, therefore, is our subject. Angela, therefore, is our subject. Okay? Then, so there, Angela is our subject. Okay? The subject of that sentence performs the action of kicking the ball. In sentence 2 above, the subject is teacher. Teacher is the subject of that sentence. The teacher advised the child. He performed the action of advising the child. So the child there is the object. Advised is the verb. And in the first sentence, Angela is the subject, kicked is the verb, which shows us the action. Then the ball is the object because it's actually a direct object because it receives the action of that verb. So that is active voice. Let me take you to passive voice. So a passive voice, a sentence is in the passive voice when the object receiving the action becomes the focus of the sentence. The object, here I would like to emphasize these two words, object, receiving. So the object is the one that receives the action, and therefore the object becomes the focus of the sentence. From our previous sentences, Angela kicked the ball, we can change them to passive by starting with the object, the verb, then the subject. The ball was kicked by Amina. It's a typing error there. It's supposed to be Angela. The ball was kicked by Amina. Is however, grammatically correct. The ball was kicked by Amina. So the ball is the object. The ball is the object. So that is the object of that sentence. Object. Then kicked is the verb or the action. The action or the verb. Then Amina is the subject of the sentence. Subject of the sentence. Now have a look at my explanation. A sentence is in the passive voice when the object receiving the action becomes the focus of the sentence. When the object receiving the action becomes the focus of the sentence. Now, our next sentence, the child was advised by the teacher. The child is the object there. The child is the object. Was advised. Advised is the verb. Then by the teacher is the subject of that sentence. So here, the object has become the focus of that sentence, and advised is the action. Then the teacher there is the subject. It is no longer the focus of the sentence because we have changed it into passive voice. So the active verb kicked in the active voice becomes was kicked in the passive voice. In sentence 1, the ball is the object because it received the action. Maybe we continue. Now, there are a few things here I want you to note that in sentence 2 above, which was saying the child was advised by the teacher, the child is the object because it receives the action. The subject, the active verb, advised, is the active, in the active voice becomes was advised in the passive voice. Advised changes to was advised in passive. So note that when changing a sentence from active voice into passive voice, the subject is sometimes omitted. The subject is sometimes omitted. This occurs when the performer of the action is not known, is obvious, or is not important. The subject is sometimes omitted in passive voice when the performer of the action or that specific subject is not known, is obvious, or is not important. So in those scenarios, we omit the subject when we are changing from active to passive voice. An example, let me give you an example. A thief stole my money. It's in active. A thief stole my money. That is in active voice. My money was stolen. Then you omit the subject which is by a thief in passive voice. Why are you omitting by a thief? Because it's obvious that a person who steals is a thief. So like I said, when the subject is not important, is obvious, or is known, we omit it when we are changing from active to passive voice. A thief stole my money was stolen. You omit a thief because it's obvious that a person who steals money is a thief. Taking you to the next part of my notes today. Active and passive voices in different tenses. Active and passive voice in different tenses. Present tense. In present tense, simple present tense, and I want you to read those sentences. She writes poems. That is in active voice. She writes poems is in active voice. She is a subject. She is a subject there. Then writes is a verb. Writes is a verb. Then poems is the object. It receives the action of that verb. Poems are the ones that are written. So it is in active voice. So in such a case, we change it to poems are written by her. Poems are written by her. So it has changed the tense. Simple present tense has changed to past participle, present participle, are written, present participle. Poems are written by her. They manage organizations. Manage there indicates simple present tense. Manage there indicates simple present tense, this word here. They manage organizations. Organizations are managed by them, are managed by them. So simple present tense changes to simple present participle. So you can write there present, then participle tense. Okay, so that is how simple present tense changes. She writes poems. Poems are written by her. So another one is present continuous tense. Present continuous tense, just like simple, same way to simple participle. I take you to present continuous tense. Read the following sentences. She is writing a poem. Writing indicates present continuous tense, and it is in active voice. She is writing, because we have started with the subject, the verb, then the object, and our focus is on the subject, which is she. She is writing a poem. Is indicates present, then writing, that ing, the suffix ing, whenever you see this suffix ing, it indicates continuity. It indicates continuity, so it is therefore the part of the verb that tells you it is in continuous tense. That suffix ing indicates continuity. She is writing a poem. In present continuous tense, we'll change to a poem is being written by her. You only change that tense. It remains the same, but you change it to participle. So it becomes a poem is being written by her. I want you to note the use of that word being. It is the one that we use every time when we are changing these verbs of present continuous tense. We must change them to being in passive. In passive, they must change to being. So ing will be replaced by being, which also happens to have ing, which indicates continuity, as I have indicated to you. They are managing organizations. They are managing organizations. It is in active and it is in present continuous tense. So it changes to organizations are being managed by them. Organizations are being managed by them. So there, I would like to emphasize that when you are changing verbs or sentences that are in present continuous tense, you must use the word being when you're changing them to passive voice, because they change to participle. And it's actually like a grammar principle that mostly we change tenses to participle when we are changing from active sentences from active to passive voice. Present perfect tense is my next example. Present perfect tense. So an example is here given to you. She has written poems. She has written poems. Active, has written, but it is in present perfect. What tells you that it is in present perfect is the use of has. The use of has. Right? The helping verb has tells you that it is in present perfect tense. When you see these words here, when you see these helping verbs, when you see has, when you see have, And when you see had, those ones indicate perfect tense. They indicate perfect tense. Okay. So has, the plural is have, and the past is had. Have, its plural is have is in plural already, and its past is had. So when you see those three helping verbs there, they indicate perfect tense. Has indicates present perfect. Has indicates present perfect, while had indicates past perfect. Past perfect. Past perfect, but has indicates present perfect. So she has written poems. In active voice, it will change to poems have been written by her. Have been written by her. They have managed organizations. Organizations have been managed by them. Have been. So the emphasis there is that when changing from present perfect tense, you use have been in your passive voice. Have been in passive voice helps you to change sentences from active voice to passive voice, which were in present perfect tense. Right, so we move on to the next part, which is past tense. Past tense. And a question was asked to me when I was here last time, which prompted me to actually teach this lesson today, that can sentences which are in past tense be changed to passive voice? And my answer was yes. And we are going to have a look at that today, because sentences that are in past tense, whether they are in simple past tense, whether they are in past continuous tense, be they in past perfect tense, all of them can be changed from active to passive voice in this simple method that I'm going to show you. In simple past tense, our first example is Teresa cooked rice. Teresa cooked rice, it is active. So Teresa is the subject there, cooked is the verb, then rice is the object. It is good if you identify those. That is object. So the importance of identifying the subject, the verb, and the object is that when you want to change, it is going to be easier because you know that you are going to bring you're going to take your subject to be the last part of the sentence, because your focus is going to be on the object in passive voice. So let's look at how that sentence changes. Rice was cooked by Teresa. Simple past tense. Teresa cooked rice. Rice was cooked by Teresa. So you use was. You use was when you're changing simple past tense. You use was when changing simple past tense into passive voice. He registered his company. He registered his company. It is in simple past. His company was registered. Was. Use of was there. Was helps you to change from active voice to passive voice well. Then we move on to past continuous tense. We move on to past continuous tense. Read the following sentences. Read the following sentences. The first one is the same sentence that we had used. Teresa was cooking. It is in past and it is in continuous. I told you that the suffix ing indicates continuity, and therefore when it is used in a verb, you should know that the verb is in continuous tense. It could be in past continuous or present continuous or future continuous. Teresa was cooking rice. It is in active, so it will change to rice was being cooked by Teresa. And I told you that when changing continuous tense, sentences, be they present, be they past, be they future, will have to use that word there, being. And changing continuous tenses, present continuous tenses, past continuous tenses, future continuous tenses, we use being in our passive voice. Right, then we move to past perfect continuous tense. Past perfect continuous tense, Teresa had cooked rice, had cooked. What I said about had, I talked about had before, and I told you that had indicates that it is in perfect tense. It is in perfect. And not just perfect, but past perfect tense. Past perfect tense. Rice had been cooked. So those that are imperfect, we use been. We use been, but we don't change the tense, only that we change it to participle. Rice had been cooked by Teresa. He had registered his company, had registered. His company had been registered. His company had been registered. We have ignored the subject. We have ignored the subject he. Why? Because if we say he had registered his company had been registered, then it means that his company already gives us the subject. So the subject is already known. His company had been registered. So we ignore, because it's obvious he is the one who registered his company. So we ignore the subject there. We omit it. As I said, that we omit subjects every time we know that the subject is obvious, is known, or is not as important in a sentence. Let me continue. So, future tense. So then how will future tense change from active voice to passive voice? Read the following sentences. 1. I will buy a car. Will indicates it's in future. Will indicates that is in future. So will indicates future tense. Every time you see will indicates future. All right. I will buy a car in the future. A car will be bought by me. Will be bought by me. Will be bought by me. Right? So it changes to will buy, changes to will be bought. Susan will eat lunch. Susan will eat lunch. Lunch will be eaten by Susan. Lunch will be eaten by Susan. So will eat there. Will eat changes to will be eaten. Changes to participle. Future perfect tense. Future perfect tense. Read the following sentences. The first one, I'll have bought a car. I will have bought a car. It is in future perfect tense. I will have bought. A car will have been bought by me. A car will have been bought by me. So will have bought. Future perfect tense. It gives a lot of students headache. So will have bought changes to will have been bought. Susan will have eaten lunch. Maybe you're saying at a given time. Maybe you mean by 2, Susan will have eaten lunch. Then you have to change it to lunch. Lunch will have been eaten by Susan by 2 p.m. maybe. But in our example, the sentence ends with Susan. Lunch will have been eaten by Susan. So you see the focus now is on the object, which is lunch, and not on the subject, which is Susan. Lunch will have been eaten in passive voice. I'd like to give you a few examples to try, a few questions to try and answer in future simple tense and some in future perfect tense, because I know It's not easy. So the first one is the bank will give you a loan. The bank will give you a loan. The bank will give you a loan. The second one is I shall have finished the work by next week. I shall have finished the work by next week. So can you try those two sentences at home? Then you send me your answers. I'll evaluate and see whether you're getting these or not. The bank will give you a loan. That is the first sentence. The second one is I shall have finished the work next week. I shall have finished the work next week. Those are your two exercises that you're going to do at home as I continue with more explanations. So my next part is practice exercises. Practice exercises. Now that we have learned these, we need to do some more practice. We need to do some more practice. For questions 20 to 23, change the sentences from passive voice to active voice. The Constitution was changed in Kenya. The Constitution was changed in Kenya. All right? So the first one is Kenya would have changed the Constitution. Kenya will have changed the Constitution. Kenya changed the Constitution. Kenya changes the Constitution. Which one do you think is the correct answer there? So my choice is Kenya changed the Constitution. The Constitution was changed in Kenya. It is in passive voice because you are starting with the object, which is the Constitution. But the subject of the sentence, therefore, is Kenya. So Kenya changed the Constitution. Kenya changed the Constitution. The second sentence is, my clothes were being ironed by Mwende. Were being ironed by Mwende. So were being tells you that it is in passive voice and in continuous tense, as I had indicated before. So were being there means that it is in past continuous tense. The sentence is in past continuous. Past continuous. It is in past continuous tense. It is in past continuous tense. All right. So my clothes were being ironed. Being ironed, it is in past continuous. Mwende was ironing my clothes. Mwende irons my clothes. Mwende is ironing my clothes. I shall iron my clothes. That is not correct at all, and it's a funny one. So the correct answer there is, you check the answer that is in past continuous tense. Mwende was ironing my clothes. Was ironing my clothes. So was tells you that it is in the past. Then ing in that verb, the suffix ing in that verb tells you that it is in continuous tense. So that gives you the correct answer there, which is Mwende was ironing my clothes in active voice. So this one is active. This one is passive. That one is passive, while this other one is active. It's active voice. The answer is active. So sometimes you can be given sentences that are in passive to change to active. So this one is in active voice. It is in active while the question was in passive. So you have changed it successfully while still taking care of the tense. The next exercise, question 22. Pictures are taken by photographers. Pictures are taken by photographers. Pictures are taken. Are taken. That tells you that it is in are taken. Are is present. Taken is perfect. So it is in present perfect tense. Present perfect. Present perfect tense. Present perfect tense. Are taken is in present perfect tense. The photographer will be taking pictures. Now will be indicates future, because will, as I said, indicates future. It will not therefore be the correct answer. The photographer takes pictures. Takes there tells you that it is wrong, because text is it's present text. The photographer took pictures. Took is past tense. Took is past tense. All right. So the verb can really help you a lot to know how to change sentences from passive to active and vice versa. The tense can help you a lot in changing sentences from active to passive and from passive to active. The photographer had taken pictures. The photographer had taken pictures. Okay. So, had taken, the photographer had taken, it tells you that it is in past tense. Past perfect, had taken. Pictures are taken by the photographer. So, the correct answer is the photographer takes pictures. The photographer takes pictures. To remain in present and perfect, to remain in present tense, it has to be the photographer takes pictures, because of this are is present, then takes, also the verb there tells you that it is in present. And I told you that sometimes in perfect tense, and not sometimes, but most of the time, the sentence changes to participle. So when you are changing it back to active, you remove that form of participle to become just the tense it is without being participle tense. The work has been finished by Naliaka. The work has been finished by Naliaka. Naliaka will have finished the work next week. Boy, Naliaka finished the work next week. Naliaka will finish the work next week. Naliaka will be finishing the work next week. I find all the choices not correct. They seem to be having an error. So the correct answer there, let me write for you, is Naliaka has finished the work. Naliaka has finished the work. So all these choices have an error. So the correct answer there is Naliaka has finished the work. Naliaka has finished the work. Naliaka has finished the work. That is the correct answer there. The work has been finished by Naliaka. It changes to Naliaka has finished the work in active voice. In active voice, it changes to Naliaka has finished the work. So the next part of my notes will be tackling questions that have been set before in the KCPE exam, and we'll find out that this part of grammar is very examinable, and it has come before in the past KCPE exams, and therefore, as bright students, the best you can do is to predict it in your next exam, which you are scheduled to take maybe next year, God willing. So, have there been questions before in the KCPE from active and passive voice? The answer is definitely yes, and that is what I'm taking you now through in my next exercise. So, topical KCPE questions. Topical KCPE questions. The first one, question 12. Odongo plays hockey up to the national level. Odongo plays hockey up to the national level. Plays hockey up to the national level. So, hockey is played by Odongo up to the national level. Hockey is being played by Odongo up to the national level. Is being played is not correct because that brings the continuous tense, and it is not in continuous tense. It is in present tense. Plays. Present. So it is in present. Right? So hockey is being, the suffix ing I told you, and the word being are used for continuous tenses. Hockey was played by Odongo, was played, that is in past, simple past tense. Hockey has been played, past perfect. It's not correct. So our correct answer there is hockey is played by Odongo up to the national level. So that is correct. It is a question that was set in the KCPE exam. The passenger gave fare to the conductor. The passenger gave fare to the conductor. Right? The passenger gave fare to the conductor. So it has to change. It is in active, it has to change to passive. So what do we identify first? The passenger there is a subject. The passenger there is our subject of the sentence. Subject is indicated by S in short form. In grammar, gave fare, gave fare. So that is the verb, the action of giving. Then what receives the action of that verb? It is the conductor because he was the one who received the fare. So the conductor is the object. Now changing it is easy because we will start with object, then we go to the verb or the action, then the subject. So the conductor was being given fare, not the tense. The passenger gave fare. It is in simple present tense. Give, simple present tense. So, simple past tense. Simple past tense. Simple present tense is give. Simple past tense. So give. The conductor was being given. Being given is not correct because that is past continuous. Past continuous. B says the conductor was giving the passenger fare. The conductor was giving the passenger fare. It is not correct according to the sentence. According to the sentence, because according to the sentence, it is the passenger who gave the conductor fare, not the other way round. And this is a common mistake that our students do in the exam. They change the sentence as to mean that the object is the one who was doing the action. It is not correct. The object will always be the one receiving the action of the subject. Let me repeat that the object is the one that receives the action of the subject, and it will remain so. But when we are changing to passive voice, it does not change that fact. It only changes, the only thing that changes actually is that now the object becomes the focus of the sentence, but the fact remains. And it's a common mistake, a common joke that goes around social media. I see sometimes sentences, people giving sentences on Facebook, on WhatsApp that change. That, for example, it's just a joke. My father wore shoes without socks. My father wore shoes without socks. Then some people jokingly so, change the sentence to my socks. Where were you when my father was wearing shoes? A common joke that you will see on Facebook, you will see, and grammar language or English language and any other language is pliable. Pliable to mean that it is easily influenced by our actions on social media. It's easily influenced by our day-to-day communications. So such jokes, they end up in as answers in the exams, because the examiner in the examiner's mind, the examiner knows that these people could have been influenced by such things. So they include as one of the choices. And interestingly, you find that students choose such answers. It is never correct that way. The only correct thing is that the object will remain in its place, but will become the focus of the sentence when we are changing to passive voice. And the subject remains with it in its place, but in passive voice, it is not the focus of the sentence, and the verb will remain. The subject will be always the one that does the action, and the object will be always the one that receives the action. So what will be our answer there? And you see, this is in a national exam, such an answer or such a choice featuring in the 4 choices. It means the examiner was very keen to note the influence of grammar from other sources. So our correct sentence there, or the correct answer there, was choice C, which says the conductor was given fare. The passenger gave fare to the conductor was given fare. You see, the conductor was given fare. Why have we omitted the subject? We have omitted the subject there because it's obvious that the person who gives fare to the conductor is the passenger. So because it's obvious, or because the subject is known, then we omit it. So it's not in all cases, and I wish to emphasize this, that it is not in all cases where the subject of the sentence is omitted when changing from active to passive voice. It's not in all cases. It's only in cases where we think that by doing so, our audience will know who the subject is, because the subject is obvious, or when we think that the subject is not as important, or when you want to hide the subject. When you want to hide the subject, you don't want to know, we don't want your audience to know who did the action. So then you choose to use passive voice, and then you will hide your subject. So we do some more practice. I have some more practice for you. The questions that I'd shown you were the most recent questions that have been tested in the KCPE exams in the topic. Doesn't mean that they are only 2. No, if you search wider, do a wider search, you will find that there are very many questions that have ever been asked in the national exam from this topic. More practice for you. The first sentence says, my sister took my book. My sister took my book. The sentence is in active voice, and you are supposed to change it to passive voice. My sister took my book. So the sentence changes to, my book was taken by my sister. My book was taken by my sister. My book was taken by my sister. The second one is, the coach suspended the player. The coach suspended the player. So you must first identify your subject, your verb, and then your object. So the coach is the subject of that sentence because it's the one doing the action. He suspended the player. The player was the one who receives the action of the verb, which is being suspended. So the player was suspended. So the player there is the object. The player is the object. So it will change to, the player was suspended by the coach. The player was suspended by the coach. On to our next sentence. Our president rewarded the brave soldiers. Our president rewarded the brave soldiers. Our president rewarded the brave soldiers. So our president is the subject, rewarded is the main verb, The brave soldiers is the object of that sentence. So we change it to passive by saying the brave soldiers. The article there, it must be used when you are changing that sentence if it was there in the active form. The brave soldiers were rewarded by our president. The brave soldiers were rewarded by our president. If you want to hide the anonymity of the person who rewarded the soldiers, then you would say that the brave soldiers were rewarded. Understood? So we continue to our next sentence, and as I'm drawing towards the end of my presentation today, I would like to be sending your feedback. The numbers provided in your screen. Engage us, send your questions, send your comments, and I'll be glad to answer them at the end of my lesson today. So we continue to our next sentence, which is that company advertised their products. That company advertised their products. That company is the subject, advertised is the verb, then their products is the object. So we start with their products, then advertise, then the company. Some people would say their products advertised that company. No, the object cannot perform the action. Even if we are changing that sentence to passive voice, the object still remains the object. There is the one that receives the action of the subject. So their products were advertised by that company. Another mistake, another common mistake that our students do, their products were advertised by that company. So you will see there that let me write their products. So the answer is going to be their products, sorry for that. So, all right. So their products, their products were advertised, their products were advertised by their products were advertised by that company. Were advertised by that company. Were advertised by that company. By advertised by that company. I don't want to write that company. So some students who are not keen enough change that to they or any other article. So their products were advertised by, then they replace that with the company. That one is a mistake that the examiner will use to confuse you, so that the examiner usually wants to test your keenness when you are doing the exam. So you find that this sentence, even though it's grammatically correct, their products were advertised by the company, very correct grammatically, but it is not the correct answer because the student has changed the sentence. The sentence was initially their products were advertised by that company, not the company, by that company. So an examiner could use that. An examiner could use that slight error to deviate you from the correct answer. So moving on to our next quick practice question. The doctor bandaged the injured boy. The doctor bandaged the injured boy. A funny answer there could be, a funny one, the injured boy bandaged the doctor. The injured boy bandaged the doctor, and it's grammatically correct, but it is not reasonable, it is not factual. So it could be one of the choices that an examiner could give you, and when you read it, you find that it is grammatically correct, then you hurriedly choose it, but you are missing the correct answer by doing so. So I emphasize that every time you are answering questions and they are in multiple choices, it is wise as a student, as a keen student, as a bright student who is sitting and preparing right now for the national exam, you go through all the choices from choice A to choice D. There are only 4 choices, A to D. So they are not as many as for you not to go through all of them. Even if you think that choice A is correct for you, it may not be the correct choice. It may be used by the examiner to trick you. So when you just read choice A and you find that it's grammatically correct, you pick it. But then you have not gone through choice B, you have not gone through choice C or choice D. So it is prudent to go through all the choices before you can settle on one as the correct answer. That is why the choices are there. They are there for you to go through them. So don't be in any hurry when answering questions in your exams. Right, so the doctor bandaged the injured boy. The injured boy was bandaged by the doctor. The injured boy was bandaged by the doctor. A free kick was awarded by our opponents. A free kick was awarded by our opponents. To our opponents, not by. A free kick was awarded to our opponents. So our opponents were awarded a free kick. A free kick is a penalty in soccer, in the game of soccer. A free kick was awarded to our opponents. Our opponents were awarded a free kick. The guests were entertained by some children. The guests were entertained by some children. So the guest there is the subject, then some children is the object, then entertained is the main verb that gives you the action of that sentence. So the guests were entertained by some children. Some children entertained the guests. Some children entertained the guests. Question 8. Delicious cakes are baked. Delicious cakes are baked. Delicious cakes are baked. So how could you change that? A very interesting one. One that does not have a direct subject. Delicious cakes were baked. So who baked them? So you have to think. This is where reasoning now comes in. That grammar is sometimes also about reasoning. It's not just about answering obvious questions that are provided to you in the multiple choices. So delicious cakes were baked. You should ask yourself, who bakes cakes? So you're not going to say he or she. Okay, you can choose that. You can replace with a pronoun. Then you say he or she to take care of the gender agreement. But the best choice there could be, the baker bakes delicious cakes. You have introduced the baker as a subject that was not there, but the sentence actually does not have a subject that is direct. So you have to think and come up with a subject. The baker bakes delicious cakes. Let me give you an example of such a sentence. They were taught well. They were taught well. Change it to active. They were taught well. So you have to ask yourself, who teaches? It is the teacher. The teacher taught them well. The teacher taught them well. So sometimes you are tricked by not being given a direct subject, but you have now the reasoning comes in. You have to think, and you have to find out the most correct subject of that sentence that suits the sentence you are tackling. The robber was terrified by the mob. The robber was terrified by the mob. The robber was terrified by the mob. So it changes to the mob. The mob terrified the robber. Don't change it to become that the mob was terrified by the robber. The mob terrified the robber. Don't change the meaning of the sentence when changing from active to passive voice. So the mob terrified the robber. The police, this suspect was interrogated by the police. This suspect, this. So this, don't change it to any other thing when you are, don't change this to become there, all right? Don't change it to become there. Don't change this to become that, If they have given you this, just stick to it when you are changing the sentence. Don't change the sentence in terms of, don't change the facts. Don't change the genders that are given there. Don't change the articles. Your work is only to twist the sentence from active to passive voice or from passive to passive voice, and that is it. So this suspect was interrogated by the police officer. This suspect is subject. Interrogated is the main verb. The police officer receives the action of that verb. Therefore, it is the object. This suspect was interrogated by the police officer. We changed to the police officer interrogated this suspect. The police officer interrogated this suspect. And you see, by doing so, I have not changed this to they. But some could confuse and say the police officer interrogated the subject. And that could be given by a clever examiner as the first choice. So when you look at it, it seems correct. It seems correct. Seems. It means it is not correct, and it will be given as the most likely as the first choice, so that a student who is not keen enough or a lazy one could just read choice A and find such a choice and pick it hurriedly without going through all the other choices to find the most suitable or the most correct choice. Right. As I told you earlier, that you keep sending your questions, you keep sending the feedback. So here are some of the questions that I would like to tackle. Is it wrong to say his company was registered by him? Is it wrong to say his company was registered by him? It's not wrong, but it is more of repetition because you already know the subject. You already know the subject, so saying by him, putting the subject at the end is more of a repetition because his company was registered. It's obvious he is the one who registered it's his company, but it is grammatically correct to say so still. However, because of the obviousness, because the subject is known, we just omit it. Hello? How can one know a sentence in participle form? A sentence in participle form, you know it by the helping verbs. As I said earlier, has, mostly, not all the time, had, and have. But then you also know it by the verb. The verb, you have to check the verb whether it is in participle, it is in present, or it is in past tense. So you check the verb. Verbs change to those various tenses. Jump, in the past it will be jumped. In participle, it will be has jumped. So has there tells you it is in participle. But some other verbs like eat, in past, ate. But in participle, eaten, eaten. So eaten, so the suffix en there also will help you to know the verbs that are in participle tense. So I know they are it's a quite large topic. There are many, you must have learned it, maybe in class 4 or in class 5, about changing verbs from present to past and to participle. So you have to look at the main verb of the sentence. Then you see, is it in past tense, is it in present tense, or is it in participle tense? And that is how you could know a verb which is in participle tense. Another one is asking. I'm Grace, watching you from Embu. Can you repeat future simple tense? Future simple tense, maybe I'll do it after answering the other questions. DJ Dave will be holding the party. What should it be in passive voice? DJ Dave will be holding the party. The party will be being held by DJ Dave. Will be being held. Don't change the tense to anything else. Will be being held. So DJ Dave will be holding the party. The party will be being held by DJ Dave. Right. I hope I have helped you. It's quite a tricky one. It does not sound grammatical, but it is correct. And it doesn't have to sound correct for it to be correct. Anyway, so, hey, it's Tracy from Busara Primary School. Yes, Tracy. Hi to you. Please, can you repeat the meaning of active voice? Please, can you repeat the meaning of active voice? I can do it. Active voice is where the focus is on the subject and the subject doing the action. The subject doing the action. The teacher taught us well. He taught us well. He is the subject doing the action of teaching. So when the focus is on the subject doing the action, rather than the object receiving the action, that is active voice. Passive is when the focus is on the object receiving the action. For example, the pupils were taught well. The teacher taught the pupils well. The pupils were taught well. And we ignore the teacher because it's obvious the person who teaches pupils is a teacher. So the subject is known in the example that I've just given you. Another question. Excuse me, please repeat the rules. I'm not sure which one because there are many. Answer to the bank. Answer to the bank will give you a loan. Oh, this one is answering the question that I had given. Let me see whether he or she is getting the question correct. A loan will be given to you, or a loan will be given to you by the bank. A loan will be given to you by the bank. Very well done. That is correct. Wherever you are, it's correct. A loan will be given to you by the bank is the correct answer. Yes, not a loan will be given to you, because we don't assume there that it's only banks which give loans. Circles give loans. Some merchants give loans also. So you don't assume, it's not obvious that banks give loans. Is there a time we start with the verb? Is there a time we start with the verb? I'm not sure what your question really is, but assuming whether you are asking whether sentences also start with verbs, yes, they do, but in rare cases. Most of the sentences start with subjects or with the object, but they also do start with verbs for sure. Another question is, what about a command? Can it change to passive voice? Command. Maybe I get an example to help you, but it changes to become a statement. I'll give an example after I answer the the next questions. Sir, I'm Ian from Komodai Boys. My question is, can the verb come before the subject when changing to passive? Can the verb come before the subject when changing to passive? Not really. Just start with the object, the verb, then the subject. Follow that order. It will be easier that way. Another question. In future perfect tenses, is it a must for me to write, a car will have been bought by me? A car will have been bought by me. Yes. If you want your sentence to be grammatically correct, then you have to change it that way. I told you, it doesn't sound correct, yes, but it doesn't have to sound correct for it to be correct. Right. As you have just said, when the subject is obvious, is it a must for it to be excluded? It's not a must, but we omit it at will. And sometimes in your choices, you may be given a choice that has the subject and another choice that doesn't have the subject. It's upon you to decide. Is the subject obvious? Is it known? Is it not important? Then you choose the correct answer. So it's not a must. It's not a rule, right? So we only omit the subject when it is obvious, when it is known by everybody, or when it is not important. For example, I say in the sentence that I just gave that pupils were taught well. You don't have to say by the teacher, because the person who teaches pupils is a teacher. It's obvious, right? So when it's obvious, still it's not a must for you to omit it or to exclude it. But the choices that you will be given now will guide you on what to do in such a case. Right, so my last exercise. So the bank will give you a loan. I had already given you those ones from question 1 to question 2. So let me start from question 3. He will have succeeded the president. He will have succeeded the president. He will have succeeded the president. How will it change? So the president will have been succeeded by him. The president will have been succeeded by him. For the ministry will construct dams in dry areas. The ministry will construct dams in dry areas. Dams will be constructed in dry areas by the ministry. Dams will be constructed in dry areas by the ministry. Don't say dams will be constructed by the ministry in dry areas, because by doing so, then you have not put the subject at the end of your sentence. The government shall fight terrorism. The government shall fight terrorism. Terrorism will be fought by the government. Terrorism will be fought by the government. Will be or shall be. You can use them interchangeably. Question 6. They were peeling potatoes. They were peeling potatoes. Potatoes were being peeled by them. Potatoes were being peeled by them. Question 7. You constructed the foundation. You constructed the foundation. It will change to the foundation was constructed by you. The foundation was constructed by you. Question 8. The milk had been drunk by Chipchumba. The milk had been drunk by Chipchumba. Chipchumba, so that is the correct answer. The milk had been drunk by Chipchumba. Chipchumba had drunk the milk, had been. Don't change the tense. Is that by changing it to participle. So had there tells you that it is in past participle. Let it remain so. I had read a storybook. I had read a storybook. A storybook had been read by me. A storybook had been read by me. We had cultivated the land. We had cultivated the land. The land had been cultivated by us. The land had been cultivated by us. And that marks the end of my lesson today. So that marks the end of my lesson. There is a question that I promised to answer. It was saying, this, let me take you back so that I get a writing space. The question was saying, I repeat future simple tense. I repeat future simple tense. Future simple tense. If I can do that for you in a minute, then I end my lesson. So future simple tense, and I give a sentence. I give a sentence, right? So future simple tense, let me give you a sentence. I will buy a car. I will buy a car. It is in active and it is in the future simple tense. So how will we change such a sentence? A car will be bought. A car will be bought by me. A car will be bought by me. I give you another sentence. Maybe Susan will eat lunch. The same example that I had given you. Susan will eat lunch. It will start with lunch will be eaten by Susan. Lunch will be eaten by Susan. Don't say that lunch will eat Susan. It will be very funny. So lunch will be eaten by Susan. Those are some of the jokes that you see on social media every day, and they may influence your language. Future perfect tense. Future perfect tense, if I can get an example for you, I will have bought a car. I will have bought a car, by maybe a timeline or a deadline that you have set for yourself. I will have bought a car. A car will have been bought by me. A car will have been bought by me. And somebody asked, is it correct to say so? Yes, it's correct to say a car will have been bought by me. So another sentence, Susan will have eaten lunch. Susan will have eaten lunch. Lunch will have been. Lunch will have been eaten by Susan. So that marks the end of my lesson today. I wish you a great week ahead. Continue following this program, Elimu Live, every weekday on KUTV from 8:15 to 10:15, and on the social media platforms, use the handles KUTV Kenya. I've been your teacher,